They're
Do
good.
do we want to do like a funny little like thing before, or do we want to just get right into it?
Let's just get right into it. Let's just go.
Jeremy's had enough of my antics and just wants to do a podcast. All right, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, and happy New Year! Happy New Year, Jeremy.
Happy New Year. Yay.
Hooray, we survived. Would you say it
2020.
was hell year?
Huh?
Would you say we survived hell year?
Well, let's see how this one turns out. So
Exactly.
I don't know. I don't know if we need a sequel to last year. Good night. Just
Well, if you think about it, every year is a sequel to the year prior.
well, yeah, but I mean, last year, I don't know. I guess I kind of, I don't know. There were some good parts of last year. I know a lot of people can't really say that. I mean, for me, there were some good parts that came out of it, but as far as certain things such as being locked down in my Faraday cage in my house and everything else, it's like that rate's about a 12 on the crapometer. But other than that, it's all
And
right.
I think different people have different experiences, and I think
Right.
we're lucky both in our professional lives and just being able to do this and
Yeah.
like among other things. And
Yeah. I
the
mean,
cool thing
right
is
now,
we got it in on the podcast territory before everyone else who was locked inside was like, "Well, I'm going to start a podcast." I think we
yeah.
were lucky in that regard, but
Yeah.
regardless of whether or not you're a valiant podcaster or a person who is doing essential work or a person who is just working, we wish you a happy new year.
Absolutely.
So how the hell have you been, Jeremy?
I mean,
We had a bit of a kerfuffle on the on trying to do something a little earlier last year. It seems like
yeah.
you're doing a lot better.
Yeah. I had just, I didn't have a lot of symptoms. I just had just this irritating cough. And I mean, it would just take over at times. And it's just, so, I mean, I wouldn't say it's completely gone, but it's definitely on the downhill mend and stuff. But I mean, today was kind of the first day that I really kind of got out. And in Kansas City, we've had between 4 and 6 inches of snow, which at one time around here is kind of an oddity. It's not that it doesn't happen, but it's pretty rare that it does. So I ended up taking the kids sledding, and so of course they kind of triple dog dared me to sled down this giant hill, and I did, and I crashed, but that's okay. It was fun, and so it was a fun time with the kiddos. So it was all right.
Right on, right on. That's always good. Being with family,
Oh yeah,
being with good family
yeah,
is always good. But around these parts, I'm not sure if way down south in Naha they're feeling this, but at least in Japan we got hit with a huge cold front. Like it's even down south here, people on like the southern islands are like, "Oh my god!" Just like getting like their jackets and their scarves and their hats, and they're like, "We haven't worn these in a long time." And even last year wasn't all that bad, so probably been a couple years since they pulled that stuff out. But yeah, just been spending the New Year's holiday chilling out, just chilling out, and it was good. It was very good in terms of at least kind of a mental break from a lot of crap. So,
yeah.
but
Very
we're
cool.
back. It's the first weekend of the new year. So if somebody's listening to this, will probably say, "Well, why didn't this come out on that day?" It's a thing called editing, kids. We don't do we don't release an episode without editing. So can take up to 2 weeks. So
And basically, John's got to fix all my dumb mistakes that I say, so it's all good.
I
So
have to fact check Jeremy on
yeah,
literally every word. No, it's stuff like it's what I edit for is just to I don't ever think it's anything bad or overwrought that I have to do in terms of editing. But if I just left it as is, it's never fun. And we don't have a theme song. Like we didn't have a theme song probably until the fall. So if I didn't do any editing, we would have no theme song. which I've heard mixed responses to, and my answer is it's wonderful. And my friend Monaco did it, and you should listen to her. You should listen to all her music, and she does a lot of music in English too, not just Japanese. So she's actually really super talented. So Jeremy, we aside from our normal chats about like what we've been doing, mainly because it's been the new year, we haven't really been doing a lot. But you had, I want to say this was probably 3 years ago. Correct me if that's wrong.
It's a little bit long. I mean, it was closer to 6 years ago.
Okay.
It was. I mean, if you want, I'll give the background on everything and stuff. So, uh,
Well,
we'll get into it, I guess. So.
right. Well, I think we'll kind of dive right into it because I think today, because of being the New Year's, and we can talk about general goal setting and whatnot. But I think what was interesting, what you had talked about, what you'd done those couple years ago, and we just kind of talked about it a little. We had never really dived into it really in our conversations, but I feel, and you put this out there to me, and I deeply concur that with the start of the new year, it's important to re-examine one's training and seeing how we can re-examine how we look at both our training and our kata and whatnot. And this, what you did goes back to an old principle that a lot of people kind of pay lip service to, but they don't really, I guess, work on
Right.
entirely. So I'll let you take it away in terms of what you worked on. I'll kind of bounce off what you're talking about.
So, I'll just kind of give the background a little bit. In 2013, my mom passed away, and mom and I we were really close. I mean, I grew up in a military family. While dad was on different exercises or deployed different places, it was mom and me. I mean, there were a lot of times, even in high school, a lot of my friends, they'd be out partying. What would I be doing? I'd be, helping mom either around the house, going and getting things from the store, and usually after that, I'd end up at home playing Monopoly with mom or Clue or something, just something that took that time away. So, I mean, my mom was a real big part of my life. And when I lost her, I will say this: the rest of that year, it was a really weird year because birth my son, my father-in-law passed, my mom passed. It was kind of it was a wild year, and I'll be perfect. When mom passed, I was numb, probably for a good 4 or 5 months, like almost just walking around like it was It was like kind of my compass was gone, and so about Thanksgiving that year, I started thinking, I need to get grounded so that I feel like I can move forward with me, with my mom gone. And so I came up with basically two activities. I wouldn't say it was a resolution, but it was like, let's start on January 1 and we're going to go all year. So I came up with two activities. One I will mention, but that's all I'm going to do. And that was I was going to read my Bible every day. Boom. So that was one. Just for spiritual recollection. I mean, even if I didn't have anything, I went and tried to get some proverbs or something to kind of get me some wisdom around something. So the second part was I wanted to go back to the base of my training, which in our art, the base of our training is Naichi Shodan. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to study Naichi Shodan for at least 30 minutes every single day for a year. I mean, I didn't have time to do an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours every day,
Right.
but let's set 30 minutes aside every day. We're going to study Naichi Shodan. And so I'm like, well, that's a great goal, but what does that entail? So I started coming up with a framework of how I was going to go about doing it. So that's kind of how I'll lead into the next part of what I did. So for the first week, I broke it up into several weeks right off the bat. The first week, all I did was try to do that kata just as natural, free of any kind of thought or, hey, this goes here, just bang, go. And near the end, I ended up taking a couple videos of it. It's like, all right, okay. And so I'm watching it and I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And so the second week, I did the very first basic Nachi Shodan that we did. And I took at the end of that week, string basic, took video of that, started comparing. I'm like, okay, this is where this is coming in, this is where this is coming in, things like that. And then the next week I did another version of Nachi Shodan. And we, in the system that I've been a part of, I can rattle off 8 different versions of Nachi Shodan that I've learned over the years, at least. Right off the bat, off the top of my head, I can rattle off 8 right now.
Right, and I think the best way I think we can probably talk about that, because we've kind of mentioned it, that we kind of gave the game away when we had David on, when we were talking about hard and soft. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about that, we're just talking about basic variations on different parts of it. It's not necessarily a completely.
Well, how is organized was a different version.
Yeah.
And basically, what it really boils down to is you have different timing. Maybe you accent something just a little bit differently. You just do just a couple things just a little bit differently.
Right.
So that's how I kind of did, and clear up till the first part of March. And I started looking at, okay, how I just do it, just boom, out of the chute, boom, don't think about it, just go. And I started seeing, okay, I'm picking up this part in this basic one and this advanced form and things like that. But then I'd start looking at, okay, there's still certain things that are coming into this kata that if I just naturally flow into it, just go, as I like to just do it, that are not coming out of kata. And so that took a lot to really boil down into it. So, and I kept going on and on and on. And so it continued over months. And then I was fortunate to have really some really good people that I was training with at the time. And I was able to do techniques and stuff like that. And so some of the times that I'd do my 30 minutes, I'd be working with these people and I'd be working on different techniques. And finally, I'd say about 4 months into the summer, we're getting about August time frame and stuff. August, around Labor Day-ish, late August, first part of September.
That's most of the year.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out, where am I getting these little nuances at? Just out of the blue, totally different. It's not showing up in any of the versions of kata. I'm like, what is it? And finally, I was picking it up on, one day I was working with one of the guys and stuff, and I was working on Bonkai. And it was just little shuffle steps and little this and little hand tweaks and different things like that. And it actually took me a couple of weeks going back and forth. It's like something's there, and I wasn't picking up on it. And finally, it was after Labor Day that I finally really started picking up on. I was like, I'm actually I'm putting those little things from the technique into my kata. And it was something simple as moving my arm just a certain way. There was part of the footwork that I did that, on just the crossover step. It makes no sense whatsoever as far as doing a kata for kata's sake.
Right.
But when you tie the technique that was related to that, it made complete sense, and I naturally just do it in the kata. And so, and what it would do is it would simply give me some leverage on techniques and things like that. So finally about October, I figured out that whole natural kata that I was doing on the Hachi Shodan. And that's what I was really looking for, is what would I do just naturally? Not forget a count, forget this, forget all that. And so I finally figured out that, yeah, I'm putting in not only different versions of Nahanchi Shodan, but I'm also, any of these little enhancements on techniques are actually going into these katas as well. And so, and I think that's where, and this is my opinion. I mean, probably other people will say, no, that's just stupid or whatever. But I think that's where you really get the most benefit out of training in kata, is when you really realize that is like your actual techniques actually coming out in the kata.
I would say that the people shouldn't be dismissing that in any significant way, because if you just kind of like gave, I don't want to say gave the game away, but you hit the nail on the head where you said you just doing kata for kata's sake, it wouldn't make sense. Well, if
Right.
you're just doing kata for kata's sake, then what are you doing?
You're doing a basic exercise. That's it.
But even then, like, with the basic exercise needs to be in service of something.
Right.
Like,
I mean,
it's going to be in service of learning how to move in some way to make something work. And there's the debate between is kata literal or representational. You
right.
know, that debate can go on forever and a day. But
Well, I mean, the answer to the debate is yes. Bottom line,
I mean,
it's both, and I think it just depends on the intention of the person that's using it.
but when you're actually working stuff that you've been working in technique or working with people,
Mm-hmm.
and putting that back in your own, not necessarily what you're teaching, but what in your own study,
Mm-hmm.
is the next level that people don't do. I mentioned this on here. I mentioned this with people. I've had a couple of people come on a Zoom training that I've hosted a couple times, and it's something I've mentioned before, where it's like everyone talks about, oh, the next level of training. Well, what is that? And with kata, because you can't, because is it just doing bonkai?
Well, I think it goes back to, as my profession, I'm an engineer. I mean, my day-to-day job, I'm an engineer. So my thing is, I want to understand everything I can at all times. And I think people have got to understand that. And I'm going to step back just a minute, because I did forget a real important portion of this.
Right.
The other part of this was, after I got, well, I'll finish up the year. I got to a point where, okay, I started understanding it. And that's probably mid-October. Now, am I like, I am the master of all the No. I'm not saying that at all. But I understood what I was doing. And to me, that was the key to what I do, how I do it, what I put emphasis on, how my techniques are created, what I do on techniques, things like that. But about near the end of that was, and I've showed you this, and since then I've even gone back and talked to Robbie about this. We used to do this thing. He used to call it the Kempo Kata.
Right, doing all the weapon, not all the weapons, but all the kata in our system all together at the same time.
Yeah, but it's not Nachi 1, Nachi 2, Nachi 3. It's not.
It doesn't go in order.
No, it does not go in that order. It's a way to. And I asked him about it, and he said, it was interesting what he said. It's like, it was just an exercise that I came up with to really kind of group everything so everybody could see the whole picture of what you're working with, instead of looking for this book over here, this book over there, this book over here. It's like the entire book,
Right.
And so I started then working on the Hachi Shodan, my 30 minutes, and then I added that every session. And it ended up being where that's really where I honed in on my adaptation of you got your block kick punch techniques. Boom, 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 boom. Nothing wrong with that. That's what they're
Absolutely fundamental.
there. Yeah, they're there.
You're not gonna be able to do karate without them.
No, you're not. I know some very, I wouldn't say strict, but very strict in their beliefs. Or strict in their following of the art. They believe, this is the only way to do it. And it's like, well, okay, that's great. You have those techniques. You have tuite techniques. Grappling techniques.
Right.
You've got Kyusho techniques. More your vital parts, vital pressure point techniques, vital area type techniques, things like that. The other thing that I don't, you kind of hear a little bit. I mean, you also have your Temi techniques, which, your stunning type techniques, which you kind of classify as Kyusho, kind of not, But then the other thing that I really picked up on doing that with Nanachi Shodan was the entry techniques. I mean, here's your technique. Yes. How are you going to enter to get that technique on in a situation? I mean, somebody is not just going to punch you, just, okay, I'm just going to stand here and punch you. No, that's not going to happen unless you are in front of some total dumbass, period.
Right. And there is no great. I want to say that you're the one of the only people who's actually mentioned something like that to me. Not the only person, but the only person with what we were doing
Mm-hmm.
in terms of being able to enter into how techniques work like that. And there's just some I don't want to keep on bringing up quote unquote debates, but there
Yeah.
are like people who would say, well, if you're just having people stand there and throw punches at each other at mid speed, then you're not really training, and you're just doing like back and forth training. All right, whatever. Like
And
that's not helpful.
I appreciate that point of view, and I definitely see it, and I definitely agree to a point, absolutely.
That
But
doesn't disqualify your point of trying to find entries though.
yeah,
Because you're still fast and hard or kind of medium speed, not trying to really hurt anybody. You still need to enter in the technique.
right. I mean, you get into, you get people throw haymakers. You get people that are boxers that are jab jab boom boom whatever. Or you get your MMA people. You get into all these different things, and what I really, I don't know, I wouldn't say I get irritated, but just it's kind of like nails on chalkboards whenever people say, "Oh, that doesn't work." Well, why doesn't it not work? What are you doing that's not making it work? What can you do to make that work? And sometimes when you start asking those kind of questions, you got to really step outside your box and really start looking at things like things you wouldn't normally look at. And that's kind of what I really started seeing through an in-depth study of just the Naichi Shodan. But I mean, I wasn't studying all the katas at the same time. I was studying Naichi Shodan as my primary source, but I was picking up things from other katas, other techniques, different things like that. So
I don't want to say a two-way path, but it's kind of your home base, and you have roads that go out, but everything kind of leads back to home base. But home base is going to lead you out to other stuff, right? It's going to have a fun circular view or I guess recyclical view of always coming back to your home, but also being able to kind of use it. I think it goes back to an old principle that we talk about, because I think once you just talked about right there, and this is why I wanted to let you go on that, because you're talking about kind of not just saying study one kata for 1 year, right? Study earnestly the kata. What the hell does that mean?
I mean, I think that means something different to everybody, and for me, that meant do whatever I needed to do to break it down, to break me down, what I'm doing with it. What am I doing with it? What's the purpose of it? and for me to get just a different vantage point of what I'm doing with it. And so,
and I think if you're talking about a practicality perspective, there are a lot of people who will say, I don't have a lot of time to put into karate, or only have so much time to put into karate. Half an hour isn't bad. That's
no,
pretty good. I think a lot of people don't even take that up.
right. And I think you really have to be intentional with it as well. I think it gets into what your intention of it is. Is it just to do Nahanchi Shodan or do a kata all year long for 30 minutes? Or is it really to study it? And what was interesting is the last week of the year, I really just kind of had fun with it. And I learned some other things, how it shows up in weapons. And so any of the two-handed weapons, I started doing the Hanchi Shodan in one way, shape, or form, trying to do the techniques using sai, tanbo, cheesies, kama.
The beloved kama.
Yeah, I know. Hey, I'll be perfectly honest, I'm starting to like it a little bit better. I'm trying to work on at least once a day, once or twice a day, just to kind of, okay, just get over this hump that I don't like about it. But
there's our 2021 goal. Start liking kama. It's learn to love the kama again.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, I think the only one I really didn't do that with was Tonfa. But
I think everyone hates tonfa. Like I think that it's a universe. That one student friend of ours, Steve, I told learn tonfa, and I said that's going to be your weapon, and he's like, all right.
So he hadn't talked to you in what 20 years?
No, I think probably since last fall. I haven't really got up with him. Anyway,
But I mean, I started seeing the one thing I started seeing with that is I started seeing how Nanchi Shodan, oh, some of the things that I'm doing, even with the techniques stuff, is showing up in those katas, such as my foot positions. It's not, oh, well, you have to have this. You know, I'm not knocking solid fundamentals. I'm not doing that. But once it gets to a point where you're doing that kata for yourself, there are times you're going to shuffle. You're going to do something else. There might be a combination to where you're wanting to torque your hips a little bit more, and you jump from a cat stance into a triangle stance to get a little extra torque on something. Different things like that, and that's the kind of stuff that I was paying attention to. So,
well, and it goes in. It's interesting that you bring that up because think of it this way. Now, let's say we take a beginner, somebody who never no experience or whatever. You don't teach that person anything but Nahachi.
Right.
And then you take somebody who just got their black belt and have them do the same thing. Then take another person who maybe trained for 10 years, have them do the same thing. You did the same thing. You're all going to come out differently.
Yeah.
And because you all have different experiences with it. I mean, if you tell somebody to study who's only just started, they're not going to understand what that means. And somebody who's only gotten maybe 5 years of training will only understand a portion of what that means. So I think it's proportionate to what the experience of the individual is in how they study. And I think what is it?
And I think to add on to your point, I think it's their experience, but I also think it's how their instructor also would kind of guide them in their studies. I think a lot has to do with how their instructor points them on how they do their study, how they actually self-study on stuff as well.
Because you could just say your first year of the curriculum is Nahachi Shodan.
Yeah.
Like, straight up, we know people who are just like, this is just one fighting system. Yeah. And Nahachi Shodan kata is just a fighting system in a kata. I'm doing an intentional accent for it.
No, I got you.
For those who know. The idea is solid, but there are... Now, let's go back even further to where this is written in Principles of Karate. That is never really explained well, expounded on in those principles. Is it?
It is. On our guiding principle number 8, In the past, the same kata was studied for 3 years. Masters would analytically research and perfect their one kata for 10 years or more. I did not do 10, I did one. You know,
Right.
do not think that you have learned a kata and become proud of your success. Pride will lead you to hurt your achievement in virtue and technique. Thus, pride can be like a poison to the world. You know, boom. Bingo.
But that doesn't tell you how to do it. It tells you what to do. It doesn't tell you how to do it. It gives it. That's a kind of a moral story.
That's a guideline. That's
right.
a guideline. I mean, it's up to how you train, how you study, how you do things. That's up to you.
Well, but it goes against the guidebook idea on karate, right? Because you can't. You won't have like a manual to be like, all right, step one, Nahachi. This is how we study it. Like, we don't have anything like that. And so I think that's why people kind of gloss over that, and to a large degree.
Yeah, and I don't know. I've always taken that guiding principle, number 8, to heart a lot. I mean, not just in karate, but also in my profession, everything. And so, in that aspect, I now kind of going back to your point, whatever your level of experience. Yeah, this is not a. I do not think that this is a beginner training method. I do not think this is a beginner training way to do. I don't think so. I mean, somebody may think totally differently, and that's totally cool. I think you definitely have to have the experience. I think you have to have the maturity. I think you also have to have a little bit of vision to kind of really reach, to really look at something like that from that kind of perspective.
Right. And I mean, it goes to your point too, where it depends on your teacher. Where ultimately, if the teacher isn't going to be able to teach you, let me rephrase, Your Honor. When I learned these things off the bat, it seemed rather thin to me because all I had was learning the kata, which was at the time seemed very easy because it was just practicing the technique, practicing the form.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had the principles.
Yeah.
Right. And there just didn't seem to be much in between. Right. And you just did the kata, you looked at the principles. You did the kata, you looked at the principles. Maybe you had a couple examples on technique, you did them. I think that's where a lot of people end up being stuck.
Yeah.
And I think when you have people who can show you lots of examples and show you lots of ideas, you know, everyone kind of gets their motor going and they're like, yeah, I finally get it or whatever, because they were shown someone else's version of what their study is, which is important.
Right.
But it isn't showing you, you know, this is what the value of the year of the kata is, or like one year one kata is.
Right.
You're just seeing some results.
Yeah.
At best of what someone else has done.
Exactly.
So I think what your story is here, or what your experience was here, is more valuable than that because it's showing your experience from that. But that's only your experience because you had, at that point, what, 20 years of training? Almost 30 years of training?
No, it was probably not quite 25.
Yeah, but close to it.
Yeah. I mean, definitely well over 20 years. Absolutely. But I think the other thing, though, is, I mean, going back to, you know, one of the most important lessons that I've learned from Sensei Oyata was, you know, when that night when he says, you do my technique. And then, you know, very quietly he says, I can't do yours either. And that really impressed on me. And I think that's where the start of me doing that came from.
And I think just the subtle lessons there are an example of time needing to be built up. And to a degree, it's always the two sides of it. A teacher needs to be able to provide these experiences, but the student needs to be able to reach into them. Anyone who's taken martial arts seriously needs to reach outside their home base. But you have to ultimately come back to that home base.
Right.
Because you need to take all these experiences. Because I see all these people like run off to seminars, run off like to go internationally train or whatever. And they come back and you know, I learned this, I learned that, and I did this, I didn't learn this kata, whatever. Okay, that's all great. How does this overall make you a better martial artist or create a better home style for yourself?
Well, I mean, I'll even go one further. How do you know who you are? Bottom line. I mean, not to get into psychological or whatever.
We're asking a lot of metaphysical questions of our audience right now for the New Year's
Yeah,
chair. Who are you? Why are you listening? Go do something with your
well, and I mean, the main thing, like I said, the main thing, I just really felt, I felt the void in my life, and I felt really lost. And I really just went back to what are the basics of the things that I care about? Boom, boom. And
There you
that's,
go.
and that's, and that, and that's why I ended up doing it. Um, and to be perfectly honest, this is the first time I've ever even shared. I've shared bits and pieces of things that I got out of it with you, but I've never shared what I did, how I did it, some of the things that a lot of the things that I found, different stuff like that, or where I found it from. So,
And I don't think anyone could talk about it because this is very specifically your experience, right?
right, exactly. I mean, if you do the same thing, you're going to get something totally different.
Yeah. And my motivation, you had a very specific motivation,
Yeah,
and a good one, but a very specific one, one that motivated um just from essentially what you just said. Who are you? What are you trying? How are you trying to identify with this stuff?
yeah,
The That's where I feel maybe other people who train in more combatively don't necessarily get the same benefit.
maybe, yeah,
Not necessarily,
yeah.
or they don't have that
I,
mindset.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. You know, but
But I think that's my point with people who try to accumulate so much stuff
yeah,
from like from seminars and the idea that you're just going back to your basics with everything you've learned,
yeah,
with everything you've experienced, right?
yeah,
And build, and not saying 2 months, not saying 3 months, not saying 6 weeks, not any stupid gimmicks. You dedicated yourself to just a year of doing one thing.
right. Now, don't be wrong. I definitely trained in other stuff, you know,
Right.
but I I just took 30 minutes every day. That was it. So,
Yeah, but do the math there over an entire year. What is that? Get out, get out. You're the math guy. I'm not.
I mean, that's 9, 10. That's almost 1100 minutes. So if you look at that, you're looking at divide that by 60. You're looking at what, close to what? I mean, you're looking at 180 to 100, about 180 hours.
Okay, so close to 4 days, 5 days,
Huh?
close to a 5 day week overall.
Yeah. Well, yeah. About 8 days in total.
Yeah. So
So I mean, you got 169 hours in one week. So yeah.
you're the math guy. I'm not.
Sorry.
I'm the fist on the table guy. Um,
I
but
mean,
I mean that's
go ahead. Sorry.
good. Nope.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I got literally nothing.
No, I mean, I guess I was just kind of curious when I was telling all this. I mean, what really came out for you? I mean, I'm just kind of curious what you.
Well, because I'm remembering, because I didn't realize this until you said the year, because I thought this was much later. But until you said the year, I remember because I remember when that happened
Yeah.
because I didn't realize that happened as a result of what your losses have been.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking like from then until now, kind of our conversations and things that had happened and kind of how we've been looking at things, and just thinking like, wow, a year of study did that. And it also probably led to other things unconsciously.
Yeah.
That I think I don't want to, bring that up quite yet, but I think that clears the mind to just focus. But it also talks about like when we talk about teachers training, right? When we talk about people who've trained for a long time and now train others, what their training should be. I've seen people just not know what to do, how to differentiate their own training. And I think this is exactly it. It's one of the things, at least, that they need to do, is to take a half an hour a day. You have one thing to work on. What's the one thing you're working on?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I don't know. I mean, I think overall, I think it totally balanced me in what I've done. I think it also really pointed out in my training a little bit of, hey, I don't need to learn 5 or 6 Joe katas. I don't need to learn. I don't have to have 5 bow kata. I don't have to have all this stuff. What do I need to really get me going? I don't need this. I don't need that. I don't need this. But then on the same token, it's like, I do need this. I do need that. I mean, it really focused in on where I needed to spend my time at.
To take time to refocus, I think is important. I think one thing we can encourage people to do in this new year, no matter how this year turns out, right? Because when we started 2020 last year, I was doing some of the kind of re-edits on some of the older episodes, just listening to how we were like reacting to the updates of everything. Yeah, we had no idea that what was to happen, right?
Yeah.
But I think despite everything else, you have this. You have your study. I think people forget that.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them. We are just the ficklest of beings who have every little facet of knowledge and just don't know what to do with it. So I guess one thing we can encourage people to do is not necessarily your method, but find a method of study in this regard that works best for you and do it.
Yeah. I mean,
see what works. Tell us. Write us. We have an email.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing, though, is, I mean, even after doing that, I think I was shocked at what I ended up getting out of it.
What do you think is the biggest thing you got out of it? I guess not biggest thing, but most important thing that you still carry around today, you feel?
I would say just my overall insight on, I mean, how I can look at something just like that and know how it relates to this, how it relates to that. And I know certain people would get mad at me. I won't get into that, because somebody would ask me, well, what's your take of that? And I'm like, well, I think that this, and I think, if you do this, and this, it'll accentuate, it'll make your technique better. I mean, just different things like that. I mean, it's like I'm able to either see advancements in someone's technique or skill level, or know how to break it down a little bit better to where it's like they can work on something more fundamental and then make that better. I think that's one of the things that I really, really got out of it, probably the most. Especially, instructing people, I think that's key.
Yeah, and I think it's the acuity of being able to know, okay, this is what I learned from doing this. How to bet, and it's kind of an issue with a lot of people who go through kind of a point of self reflection and a point of self renewal, is they don't know how to kind of make that apparent without being like, I did this thing. Oh man, I really, gone from here to there. Like, and they don't, and they know how to kind of say it, but it's never effective to anyone else because they didn't go through that. That only that person went through that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing now I've gotten a couple more seconds to kind of knock out some of the gray matter in my head. Um, I think the other thing that I really got is depending upon your intentionality of your training is what you're really going to get out of it. I mean, it's something simple and cliche to say, but if you're really working your techniques, if you're really working, how to move through your katas, working on your hips, looking at these kind of things, different things are going to influence you, and you may not even know it.
Yeah.
And I think that one, I think the shocker, I think the big shock was how I was putting literally little parts of technique into how I naturally do Nahanchi Shodan. And I think, to me, I thought that was really, it was an eye opener where it's like all your training comes back, and it's kind of like what Mr. Oyata used to say, or Sensei Oyata would say, is same. He'd always say that same, all the time. He'd say that. And, I think I kind of finally get it a little bit more today. Is like, yeah, this is part of it. This is part of it. This is part of it. It eventually it's all going to come together, and how you make it come together is up to you. Bottom line, but you got to figure it out. You can't take somebody else's word at some seminar or wherever else, or your sensei, or
a podcast.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to figure it out.
Well, I think it's important to even tell people, it's like, this is what I'm trying to work out.
Yeah.
And even you got to spend time alone to do that, but you also have to know when it's okay to talk to others and try to figure stuff out as well.
Yeah. And I mean, you bring up a really good point. I mean, I had some really good people that I was training with at the time that were really supportive, and I mean, they were knowledgeable as well too. I mean, they had been doing this, 20 to, and one of the guys I was working with had been doing this almost 35 years.
Yeah.
At that point. So whenever I'd bring something up to him, he was I don't know if critical would be it, but it was a awesome sounding board, because he would juncture in like, okay, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? And it'd get him excited about it, and he'd start, messaging me through the weeks like, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I'm thinking about that, and so it started really kind of feeding itself after a while. So, which is a good thing. So,
yeah. So I guess the thing we can say is, know yourself, but know the people around you too.
Yeah. Make sure you got a training, somebody that you can totally trust as a training partner.
Yeah. Because I don't think no martial art was built with one person.
No, not that I know of.
Yeah. And, I think that's I think an important side part of this.
Absolutely.
Where as much as your own individual training will go, those people in your life will help define it. And if you're not willing to reach out to them for it, then
yeah. Anyway,
cool. Anything you want to end it on?
No, I think that's it. I mean, the main thing is I mean, we've talked about this for a while, and like I said, I've never published anything. I've never really spoke about the entire process. I've never really what I did on it. I mean, a lot of people said, "Oh, I want to know what did you do? What'd you do? What'd you do?" I've had a lot of people say that, but this is probably the first time I've ever really even talked anything about it in great detail. So.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're sharing it with us, and I think this is another thing we will hone on. I think on another time during the month, where we'll talk about how long should we be spending on one thing, and I think that might be another subject for another time. But cool.
Cool.
So into the new year, Jeremy, what are you working on?
Well, yeah, right now I'm trying to get my arm a little better. I was going through some stuff, working on some dead hand techniques and different katas and stuff, and basically hyperextended my elbow. So it's nice and swollen, and it's yeah. I'm maybe people are hearing this compression sleeve kind of roll up and down my arm, and it's like I'm trying to keep it going so I can get the swelling out. But that was a lot of what I was working on last week and a half, 2 weeks of the end of the year. It was kind of just some of the things were kind of interesting. I was picking up. I mean, it wasn't one thing. I mean, I'd work with it with psi, and then try to work on empty hand techniques with it, and coming from different angles and stuff. So that was a lot of what I was working with.
Just got you in the wrong place and then you get that hyperextension.
Well, I mean, I'm getting older, and it's like I think I got a little too excited and put a little too much power, and yeah, I shouldn't have done that. So yeah, it's another learning lesson. Don't do that. So.
I think I'm gonna try to take on.
I'm not 25 anymore, so it's like,
Are any of us? God, what I'm looking at doing, similar to what you were doing, but possibly not with the same motivation, is looking at Seison
mm-hmm.
and just trying to put study into Seison that it's needed. It's something I've actually shown. It's been one of the katas I've shown online a couple of times, and I think it's something I want to improve on. It's something I want to make good. I kind of want to make mine. I've made Niseishi kind of a demo kata, but Seison I think is one of those katas that everyone has to some degree, but is also we have a very specific version of it that's only ever done. That it's only also done by another brother style. So work on that, show it, work on the details of it, and just possibly follow your method with my own variation. Cool. Well, is there any parting words of New Year's joy you wish to share with the world, Jeremy?
Hey, no, not really. It's just something funny just kind of came up. I mean, Cobra Kai in the third season came out, and so it's been fun catching up with a few friends and people who've watched it, who accidentally binge watch even though they didn't want to. But and so it's I guess parting word is Cobra Kai never dies. So it's kind
of I guess. I guess. All right. We'll be talking about that on the show. We will probably for the end of January. So I mean, January is going to be maybe a banner month for us. But yeah, Cobra Kai. I guess suppose never because nothing never dies anymore. But yeah, everybody have a safe and happy beginning of the year, and don't forget to keep training.